it's more simple for the business community. You know, as an agency, if they come forward and say, hey, I can take care of all of this for you, as a business, I would say, absolutely. You know, they'll talk with their attorney, and the attorney says, let them take care of it. So that's what the hospitals have done. They've made a choice, you know. Now what happens is that the consumer choice, yours as a deaf consumer, your choice of interpreters is not necessarily met, but the overall needs of the hospital are being met. I don't want to have exclusive contracts with individual interpreters. It's much more easy for them to contract with an agency to do that. So if the agency says, you know, go back, figure it out, work with the freelance interpreters to make this work. Don't ignore your contract, but you are throwing out the consumer choice portion of the law. The consumer has a right to select. And now the hospitals go back to ground one, that I'm working with the freelance interpreters. ADA says you have to be a qualified interpreter. There's nothing in the ADA law that says it has to be consumer choice, but within our state law it says that they are allowed consumer choice has to be given consideration, and the hospital also has to meet all the requirements of the HIPAA law. Oh my gosh, while we don't agree, but where I see the problem is that the exclusivity within the agencies that the hospital uses is causing the issue. If the hospital says to the agency, we have a preference by this consumer, you know, that they want Susie Young who is a certified interpreter, and says, well, Susie Young's not under our contract. It's like, okay, that's fine, too bad. Give me who you got. You know, what if the agency would say, so if, okay, you want Susie Young, then the agency, hey, Susie, can you do this? Yes, well, then you have to sign our contract. So why does the agency mandate that Susie do a contract? And why doesn't the agency just say, hey, we'll go ahead and let Susie Young do it and allow Susie to do the assignment and not be exclusive? Don't tie the hands of both the interpreters who work for the agency and the hospital both. You know, don't have all the exclusivity of those contracts. They're tying the hands of the deaf community. So that's the issue.
Within the private sector, the problem, there is not a single agency out there who will admit to having a single exclusivity contract, period. But the fact of the providers don't know the difference. So when we're talking about the private sector, we, the deaf community, are putting it upon you, the interpreting community, to inform the provider, I will take a contract and do this job for you, but if I can't meet your need, you can go outside of me. That is the responsibility of the interpreting community. And we are now demanding that you all do that.
Yes, you're correct. So that word exclusive contract, is that even legal in Kentucky?
Any contract is legal. Anything two parties agree upon.
But the
If two parties
exclusivity,
agree on it, it's legal, yeah.
so that means that interpreter
It's
can't go
absolutely
outside
legal
the
if there
agency.
is an exclusivity contract. Like I said, the agency won't admit it. And there probably isn't one, but the provider don't know any different because they don't understand the whole concept.
Yeah, there is.
Well, I don't know if
there are
any of that-
some that understand that.
So the problems with the agency. So the problems with the agencies.
The problem is that the agencies that have this contract, and yes, exclusive contract, are legal. The problem is the agencies are not informing the providers, hey, we're not exclusive. And the providers don't understand the industry and they don't know any better.
So you're saying the problem is the agency, not businesses. Well, I'm sure we all know that for many years, but it's not the, I mean, it's the interpreters, but it's the agency owner who's the problem.
I'm saying
Obviously.
as
Because they're the ones who's telling business there's exclusivity contracts. They're the problem. So they need to be educated.
In the private sector, it is the responsibility, in my opinion, of the interpreting community to educate the service providers as much as it is the deaf community, but they're not listening to the deaf community.
If the interpreters have access, because I do freelance on the side. If an agency told me, you print for me, I would tell them, you're crazy. I've never, no. But we don't have access. If an agency has contracted business, how can the interpreter, no, that's not right. You need to have some power that be have teeth, because interpreters
No.
will not supersede agencies.
Not the individual interpreter, the person who's signing that contract. When they sign that contract, yes, there's nothing wrong with contract. Contracts are great, as long as both parties understand that, hey, if we can't meet your needs, you can go outside. It's
So-
not just you have to use me and nobody else.
Gotcha.
When you say meet your needs, what does that mean?
Whatever your needs are. For me, I have different needs depending upon which setting I'm in. I have certain people I prefer to use for work. They understand my terminology, they understand what I do. But if I go to the doctor, I don't want the people who's in court with me knowing what the doctor said about me.
Now, the Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, our issue is that, we have to have a law that backs us on
Are
that.
you talking
Is there
about
a
how
law
about the
that
difference
backs us
between the
on
private
that?
sector or the public sector? If you're talking to state agency, that's a completely different issue.
No, yes, I understand that. State agency is different, we can handle the state agency part of it. We have the regulations for that. We've already talked to you about those regulations. We'll talk about that again. But I'm talking about in the private sector, is there a law that gives you protection to say, what your needs are being
There's
met or not being
definitely
met?
a law that provides that my need must be met. Now, if my need consumer choice, no.
Right.
But that's what I said. You all need us as much as we need you. And if you're not going to take this step on your own, not because the law requires it, but because we, the deaf community, require it, if you're not going to take this step, then you're starting to go and see your business going down because we get fed up with it.
Oh, and I do understand what you mean, Marcia. So let me try to explain, tell me if I'm wrong, and I understand what you're saying. Unfortunately, the ADA does not go into enough depth as far as what, quote unquote, meeting your needs are. The only thing that the law says is qualified, and that's not clear. What we in Kentucky says, that Kentucky says qualified, is that we have to have individuals who can take it upon ourselves to define what qualified is and what meets the needs of the consumer. So as of today, I can't blame some of the businesses out there who are in the private sector for not doing their job because they are following the law. And that's unfortunate. There is no lawsuit that I can file because they are following the law as it exists. The issue is we need to try to come up with something that gets them to understand what they're doing, and I believe what we can do is do it without a law. I believe we can do it without having a law, is do we have a good connection with the hospitals and have them understand what exclusivity contracts mean. What we need to do is break that down so that they see it from your perspective, what the exclusivity of interpreters does. So, we've got a business card and we hand it out, and some individuals go in and hand it and say, here's a business card, I only want this individual. And they say, well, that's fine, but I can't have a contract with that individual. I don't have a contract with them. Even though you've got a business card, the business card does not allow for dialogue. But in my opinion, the business card can stop the dialogue in fact. It can mean that, well, I already have someone in mind.
I'll
for
be
this
there before
assignment.
we leave here. Those of you who don't know me, I'm an attorney. I do a lot of this kind of work. Anybody, before you leave here, I'll give you a card. If you have a legal need, I hope you'll call me. If you don't, you don't. Giving you my card does not obligate you to call me.
No, Marcia, I'm not meaning your business card. Oh, I'm not meaning your card. Yes, you know, you can give your business cards away. What I'm saying is that when I go into a doctor's office, if I have an appointment and, you know, I got it in the following week, I need to have an interpreter, you know. And, you know, I get calls all the time. This person has to see the doctor, and you need to have a licensed interpreter there. But what they say is, no, I want this other person there. It's like, well, what's going on? So I'll call to the deaf person, and I'll say, you know, you gave this card to the doctor's office. You said you wanted that interpreter. The doctor says, you have to have a licensed interpreter, and they're ready to go. It's like, oh, that's fine. I'll take a licensed interpreter. Sure, that's not a problem. You know, I understand them fine. And it's like, okay, so I go back to the doctor or to that company and say, this individual is more than happy to accept that interpreter. Did you call and inform them that you couldn't get, you know, John B, but you can get another certified interpreter? And they said, oh no, because they said they only wanted this person. But in reality, the deaf person says, no, I'm happy with another interpreter as long as they're qualified. You know, this is not under contract, but I'm more than happy to accept Vicki or another interpreter that's available. But what they didn't understand is, you know, if I give them the business card, were they telling the doctor this is the one and only interpreter that they wanted, or were in fact they're just saying that this is an interpreter that's available that I do understand, but if they're not available, I'm more than happy to take another interpreter. So, you know, the doctor's office could have called and said, I'm sorry, you know, this interpreter is not available, can you take someone else? That's my point. You know, you would be amazed at the number of calls we get on a weekly basis that's the issue. It's like, well, hold on just a minute. We'll call that person. It's like, you've got an appointment on such and such a day. The interpreter that you said you prefer is not available, but they have someone else. Is that okay with you? It's like, yeah, it has nothing to do with the exclusive contract. It has to do with the deaf person misunderstanding how to make the request for any interpreter. So you as individuals have to be educated. You're right that you have certain rights that are in place, but in fact you have to understand how to exert your rights within a business community and how to explain yourselves in a way that makes it clear. You can say it's important that this interpreter is my preference. If they're unavailable, give me a call and I can give you the name of another interpreter, or that you have the name of an interpreter, and would that be acceptable to that individual? So the question I'm asking you, Virginia, so is there such a thing as an exclusive contract? I make an appointment, and so they're working with a different agency. Can they work with a different agency? Can I look at their contract and see who's on their list of exclusive interpreters? So, you know, do they give them a discount because they use that exclusive? Is that a contract? How does that work? Those two have an agreement between that company and the business, and so they come to an agreement on, yes, they can do whatever they agree to within that contract. Now, what that says, I don't know. So in fact, you know, if they say, well, we have a contract with this agency, can we see what their contract says? So what I'm saying is that we have two entities. We have business companies who have contracts and agreements that are legal and are trying to do the right thing, and agencies are trying to do the right things legally as well. And then we have to look at it morally for deaf people. We're saying this doesn't work for us. It needs to be